You done now?
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Gale, co-creator of Back to the Future, and you're listening to Brad Gilmore.
Doc! Okay, relax, Doc. It's me. It's Marty.
No, it can't be. Just sent you back to the future.
Yeah. Oh, I know you did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
Great Scott.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Whoa, this is heavy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast looking back in time, the greatest film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore. We are back here, season 9 of the show, 7 episodes in. Tony, Daz, and Angela shocked and amazed us last week on the podcast. Of course, we talked about Back to the Future, the musical. The episode before, we talked about the unshot. Would they be unshot? That doesn't sound right. But the versions of the Back to the Future script and the evolutions, which, by the way, someone on Twitter, I believe, hit me up and said that some of those scenes are in the Back to the Future novelization. This is something that I don't know if I should admit. Well, I guess I will. I have a tough time with movie novelizations. I've tried several times, and I find them difficult reads. And I find them difficult reads because I already am aware of what happens to the beat, right? So when I'm reading, because I actually attempted to read the Back to the Future novelizations, and not that they weren't well written. I just had an issue trying to get through them. Now, this was several years ago, but I just knew what was coming. So the tension of the moment and the suspension of, part of the thing of reading a book is you have the theater of the mind, and you're able to kind of visualize the story from the narrative of the author. And when you already have seen the realized vision of that on screen, it takes away from a little bit of the fun of the novelization. So I've tried to do them with Indiana Jones. I've tried to do them with Back to the Future. I've tried several times. I just have an issue with it, but I am willing to revisit it and will, for the sake of this podcast, to look at the Back to the Future novelizations under great detail. And we'll break them down maybe here on the show eventually. But yeah, we've had some fun on this podcast so far this season. Today, we are continuing to question the future. We're going to look at some of the questions that have been submitted by you all, the pinheads. I will read through them. We'll talk through them. Also, there's a couple Back to the Future news stories that I want to read for all of you so that we can stay in touch with all things BTTF. Speaking of, I want to give a big shout out to Stephen Clark and all the fine work that he does there on backtothefuture.com. If you haven't visited the official website of Back to the Future, make sure you go do that. There's all kinds of cool new stuff that we'll look at as far as props and things of that nature, new memorabilia, toys, games that are coming out. We'll kind of do a little perusing of the backtothefuture.com website and see what we have in shop. But definitely want to give a big shout out to Tony, Angela, and Daz for dazzling us last week on the show. Real excited about the Back to the Future musical, and want to take this time to remind you, if you love this podcast, go over to the Apple Podcast app, give us 5 stars, write a little review so I can read it on the show. Always like the feedback. If there's something in particular that you want to hear on this show, make sure you tell me a topic that you want to cover, an angle of the films that we haven't discussed here at length. Make sure you tell me so that we can do a deep dive in different facets and avenues of Back to the Future. I've been all over the place recently. I have some new book ideas that I'm excited about. Make sure you go get my book, Back from the Future, Celebration of the Greatest Time Travel Story Ever Told. I've been working on an album with my band, shooting television shows and writing some wrestling. So I've been all over the place. So I want to hear from you all. What do you want to talk about on this show? I still have some cool stuff set up as far as watch-alongs and commentaries and some other special guest interviews that we're just trying to line up and get some dates on. But overall, really have fun so far with Back to the Future, the podcast, season 9. And we're about to do yet another episode. So without further ado, let's question the future. Let's do a little time capsule of some of the current news and things that are coming out about the franchise, which we all love, right now on Back to the Future, the podcast.
Hey, Dr. Stang. This is tomorrow's newspaper.
Precisely. I already went further ahead into time to see what else happens. Hey, Scott!
And let's get into some of the goodness that is Back to the Future. Want to start off with this. We talked about it last week, and this is an article that was published on the 22nd of June on Deadline with the headline, Back to the Future musical confirms Broadway 2023 opening. Those of you who don't know, we talked about it last week on the show. If you missed the episode, go back and watch it. But Back to the Future is coming. The musical is coming to the States finally. The West End hit musical Back to the Future will get a Broadway staging in 2023. Producers confirmed in a tweet on the 22nd. Synchronize your watches. The future's coming to Broadway 2023. The tweet read, the musical is based on the 1985 hit film starring Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd. Features music and lyrics by Alan Silvestri and Glenn Ballard, and a book by Bob Gale adapted from the original screenplay by Robert Zemeckis and Gale. The West End production, which opened in 2021, stars Ollie Dobson in the Fox role of Marty McFly and Roger Bart as Emmett Doc Brown, played by Christopher Lloyd in the film. If y'all haven't seen the teaser trailer for the musical, it does get you very hyped. That's really all the details that are out there right now. Of course, we know Back to the Future was named the best new musical at the 2022 Olivier Awards. But it's coming. It's coming to New York. So make sure you go over to backtothefuturemusical.com and sign up for alerts so you can get priority access and ticket information for the musical. But here's really the story that everybody was talking about over the last couple of weeks. And this is according to the local paper here in Houston. It's the Houston Chronicle, chron.com, of course. And this is the story. A rare Back to the Future VHS sells for $75,000 at a Texas auction house. A digital copy, I'm going to read the story. A digital copy of Back to the Future will set you back about $15 on iTunes. But real Back to the Future nerds might spring for the complete trilogy in limited edition steel book right now on Amazon for $70. Yes, we have those. But if you really, really want to prove your bona fides, what does that mean? Your bona fides, if you really want to prove you're bona fides? That's like you're a bona fide fan? Anyway, you need to own it on VHS, which the market has likely ballooned now that a copy has sold by the Texas Heritage Auctions for $75,000. Granted, the one sold last week is far from a normal VHS. First, it's sealed in its original shrink wrap, including the white MCA home video watermark, making it even rarer collectible given that the classic time travel comedy starring Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly is now 36 years of age. But here's a kicker, guys. This is what really made it worth a lot. Second, this specific copy of the film was auctioned by its original owner, actor Tom Wilson, who played a history book's worth of McFly family bullies throughout the films, most notably Biff Tannen. Well, I mean, I guess there's Griff and Buford, but it's really Biff and several versions of Biff. And they have an image of the shrink-wrapped copy with the MCA home video logo all over it. The VHS came with a signed note from Wilson as well as a picture of him holding it, donning white cloth gloves, and also holding a toothpicked festive jerkin. Not included. This is a VHS tape of the first release of Back to the Future sent to me by the studio at the time, Wilson notes reads. Since I knew the VHS platform would be around forever, I saved it for later, and now I can't find a VCR. Oh well, enjoy. Wilson, who somewhat famously carries business cards to answer fax for Back to the Future fans who might recognize him, including his confirmation that Michael J. Fox is nice, also sold sealed copies of Back to the Future 2 for $16,250 and Back to the Future 3 for $13,750. Each came with a signed provenance from the late Tom Pollock, former Universal Studios chairman. You have this provenance from dated May the 18th, 1990. Dear Tom, best always, signed T. And it was from Tom Pollock. That's interesting. I like that. For younger readers like the intern who once told me she'd never heard of VHS, but who loves the idea of analog formats like vinyl, a VHS or video cassette is effectively a spool of magnetic tape that contains separate video and audio tracks that somehow are read by a VCR as it moves the tape from one side of the plastic shell to the other. The picture also quietly, okay, we know how VCR works. Despite the degradation of VHS tapes and the increasingly difficulty of finding a machine that will actually play them, the analog format has seen to boom in collectible sales. Heritage Auctions also just sold a near mint plus VHS copy of The Goonies, featuring a white wraparound of the Warner home video watermark that collectors apparently covet for $50,000, and a mint copy of 1983's Jaws VHS release sold for $32,500. Among the lot was also included Star Wars and Ghostbuster VHS releases, and one of the most important titles, Top Gun. While home videos were originally incredibly expensive, hovering around $70 per tape on average, the fighter pilot flick with a legacy sequel currently in theaters helped launch the format into homes, which was relatively affordable at the $26.95 price tag, quickly making it a must-own. A 1987 promotional copy of Top Gun with a Pepsi logo on the cover sold for $17,500 last week. The success of the inaugural auction shows again the power of these movies, and the format holds over audiences both young and old, said Joe Madalena, Heritage Auctions Executive Vice President, in a release. This is a new era of collecting, and it's clear there's a deep love for what we're offering. We can't wait for the next VHS auction. Well, there you go. Look at that. It's pretty nuts that the tape sold for $75,000, and out of all those titles, it garnered the biggest auction sale. Now, of course, it had that tie to Tom Wilson and things of that nature, but even look at the sequels. Back to the Future 3, $13,500, and Back to the Future 1, $75,000. It outdrew The Goonies, it outdrew Star Wars, it outdrew it all. And that's pretty incredible because I have these movies on VHS now, and I have a VCR. I have one of those VCR DVD players still in my house with my wife and I. So it's pretty dope if I do say so myself. It's just incredible, though. It's incredible that the film garnered that kind of attention. Somebody wanted to pay 75 G's for it. Now, I love Back to the Future. There are very few things I pay $75,000 for it, and maybe a DeLorean time machine. But aside from that, I can't fix my lips to tell my wife I spent $75,000 on a Back to the Future VHS. That would be a tough one. That would be a toughie, as they say in the business, to explain to the missus. Last story we want to talk about today is something that I'm really excited about that is kind of happening somewhat in my backyard, my own backyard here in the great city of Houston, Texas. This comes from NPR.org. This was published about a month ago, and it reads, this is the headline: DeLorean is back, parentheses, to the future with an electric car and some caveats. So for those of you who don't know, DeLorean did announce they have a new concept car. If you haven't seen the art, it's phenomenal. Here's what the article says. In 1985, the movie Back to the Future made a DMC DeLorean in both a time machine and a household name. Almost 4 decades and several corporate iterations later, the latest car maker to bear the DeLorean name is getting closer to launching its highly anticipated electric vehicle. The DeLorean Motor Company revealed images and details about the car, the Alpha 5. Wait, Alpha 5? Isn't that Alpha's name from Power Rangers? The robot? Isn't he Alpha 5? Anyway, to early access subscribers on Monday before its website went public the next day, the concept car, which was first teased back in February, is set to premiere at the prestigious California car show Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance in mid-August, with limited production set to begin in 2024. The Alpha 5 is a representation of the last 40 years of DeLorean, the chief marketing executive officer Troy Beats said in a statement. There was an enormous responsibility to make sure we honor the history of the DeLorean brand, but an even greater responsibility in curating its future. I think we did both with the Alpha 5. Now, the next headline says it's not the same company behind the original car, which we know. Despite its name, the DeLorean Motor Company behind the Alpha 5 isn't the same one that brought the world the DMC DeLorean in 1981. The company produced only 9,000 cars at its Northern Ireland factory and went bankrupt in 1982 before Back to the Future even arrived in theaters. It had a series of high-profile financial and legal troubles, culminating in the founder, John DeLorean's involvement in an FBI sting operation that ended with him arrested on conspiracy to obtain and distribute 55 pounds of cocaine. He was acquitted of all charges in 1984, though he later went on trial for fraud and was forced to pay millions of dollars to creditors and lawyers in the ensuing decades. Yeah, if you haven't watched the, I think it's called Being John DeLorean movie with Alec Baldwin, I suggest you do. It really explains that story in detail, and it kind of seems like he was set up for the cocaine thing. Anyway, we get back to the story. Around the same time, a Liverpool-born mechanic named Stephen Wynn, who's been on this podcast, what up, Stephen, had moved to the U.S. and opened a repair shop focused on British and French automobiles. He began to focus exclusively on DeLoreans at a moment when no one else wanted to. Compared to what was around, it was an incredible-looking car when recalled to the popular mechanics in 2019, but there were no factory support, and I was going to have to figure it out. It was part business, part ego. By mid-1990s, he had acquired the rights to brand and inventory of the DeLorean Motor Company, of which he became the CEO. The current company is based near Houston in Humboldt, Texas, with additional locations in Florida, Illinois, and California. It hinted at other cars for years. For example, the company announced plans for an electric vehicle in 2011. In 2016, said it would reproduce hundreds of the original DeLoreans following the passage of a federal transportation act allowing car makers to build a small number of replicas. Fast forward to 2022, when it announced plans for a reimagined electric DeLorean. Juice DeVries, the current CEO of DeLorean Motor Company, told Texas Public Radio in March that the new cars would be in a yet unconstructed building in San Antonio, with the company planning to hire up to 450 people over the next several years. And while the Alpha 5 is being advertised as a comeback, he stressed the brand never really left. DeLorean lived on in online games like Forza and Need for Speed and Asphalt, Playmobil, Hot Wheels, he said. The brand never left the market, and a lot of ideas that the DeLorean worked with in the early 80s is actually something that we're developing further. So there's the article based on it, and it says that we will be a public company. DeVries said, we have to be. Building cars isn't cheap, and you need lots of money to make it happen. So they're trying to fund this project by going public with their initial IPO. DeVries told Autocar that the car will be sold in a limited run of 88 cars, which is obviously a nod to Back to the Future. Those will be suitable for only on tracks and not for the road. Yeah, I saw that they won't be street legal initially, which is kind of odd, to be honest with you. The car is expected to be in the $175,000 price range, which is a big leap because the original DeLorean cost $25,000 back in 1981. Wow. So we're going to have a DeLorean that's going to be here, and you can travel from 0 to 88 miles per hour in 4.35 seconds. It's going to be interesting to see, but those are some of your headlines from the future, and now we're going to go into another segment. We're celebrating the 37th anniversary of Back to the Future, and I thought we'd jump into a time capsule. We're going to hear Three interesting clips. The first, if you bought the 35th anniversary edition of Back to the Future, you would have heard this, but if you haven't, which some of you may not have, here is a little clip of an audition. An audition from a man who wanted to play Marty McFly, who had famous parents, comedian parents. Here's Ben Stiller in his audition for 1985's Back to the Future.
So what are your parents like? Are they as square as mine?
Lorraine, lately I've come to the conclusion that I don't know anything about my parents.
Marty, why are you so nervous?
Well, have you ever been, in a situation where, well, you know you have to act a certain way, but when you get there, you're not sure you can really go through with it?
Like when you're out on a first date with someone?
Well, sort of.
But you're good, Marty. You're really good. And that audition tape of yours is great. You've got to send it to the record company.
They hate it. What if they say, get out of here, kid? You got no future. Why should I put myself through all that anxiety? Oh, jeez, I'm starting to sound like an old man.
Well, you know, they say that all of our emotional anxiety comes from our parents.
In that case, you can kiss me up right now.
I think Ben Stiller would admit probably not his best performance, but fun to hear him read in that scene with a potential Lorraine Baines. And it's interesting to imagine what it would have been like with Ben Stiller. It definitely wouldn't have worked. And that's no knock to him because I'm a big Ben Stiller fan, but I don't think it would have worked. Talking about the audition process, let's hear from a recent clip of one of our favorites, Tom Wilson, talking about auditioning for the role of Biff Tannen. This was in a Q&A, one-man spoken word series it seems like he was doing. And let's take a listen.
So it was the final audition. They said they want to see you at 6:30. Steven Spielberg will be there. Robert Zemeckis, the producers, the head of the studio will be there. Everyone will be there. 6:30. At 8 o'clock, I had tickets to see Bruce Springsteen with my hot girlfriend, who's now my hot wife of 33 years. So I go to this audition, kind of in a hurry, and I do it with Crispin Glover's there, and I put Crispin in a headlock, and McFly, they had written specific audition pieces so that we couldn't read the script, really. So I go through the scene, the director takes me aside, he goes, Tom, I really want you to kind of physically, really get this guy. I mean, really kind of rough him up a little bit. So I'm an actor and I'm young and I'm just like, I go for it. That's how I do it, Anna. Let's go for it. I'm not, I just make it happen, baby. All right, let's do it again. So McFly, and I'm just dragging him by the shirt, dragging him across this big table in the room. I'm doing all this kind of stuff. Hello, anybody home? I finally take his shirt and I lift him into the air because he's smaller than me. I lift him, McFly, and I'm doing this. But I've done so many physical things and he's in the air and that voice in my head are you a moron? What are you doing? You've blown the whole thing. So as he's in the air, I completely forget all the lines in the scene. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm like, yeah, I put him down and just totally and scene. That's all. And they say, thanks very much for coming in, Tom. Thank you, really, really, thank you. Crispin, would you stay, please? Thanks, Tom. And everyone else saw Bruce Springsteen dancing in the dark, and I was I've destroyed my entire career. The opportunity of a lifetime. But I was because I was auditioning against real guys like movie stars and stuff. So I was just hoping that they think he's good enough, we'll cast him as one of Biff's gang members. I really thought, maybe I could be one of Biff's gang members. That'd be good, be in a movie. The next morning, my agent called me and said, you got the role of Biff in Back to the Future. So it was a thrill, But like you guys, like in every artist, we have an ego, right? We have an ego. So I swear, it was half, that's fantastic, and half, well, it's about time. Because, I mean, I've been doing these auditions for a few years now, and I'm pretty good. So there was that.
I could really listen to him tell stories all day long. Such a big Tom Wilson fan. Now, of course, we know that they originally shot on the film for several weeks. 6 weeks. Some people say 8 weeks. Some people say 5 weeks. You know, it gets lost in translation. They had to make the decision to pull Eric Stoltz, and definitely a difficult one. We know that Tom Wilson had his issues working with Eric Stoltz. He said that Eric was very method, and had some interesting physical altercations in takes with Biff Tannen, played by Tom Wilson. But there is a clip of Christopher Lloyd, who's been on this show, I'm happy to say, talking to Sam Roberts, friend of mine, Sam Roberts, about the Eric Stoltz replacement and why he thought that, or if he knew Back to the Future was going to be a movie talked about here some 37 years later. Let's take a listen.
And what a throw. Christopher Lloyd is with me. What's the haps?
Yeah.
Do you know when a movie's special before you do it? Because you've done, like I said, a few movies that people would think are special. You know, you've done movies that are just, they're there and then they're gone, but then you'll do movies that kind of last forever.
You get a little feeling, you know. I mean, it was kind of a feel on Back to the Future that it was something special. I don't know that anybody anticipated. You know, we hope to be a great opening,
sure,
and have a run. I don't think anybody expected what we got. You know, maybe Spielberg or Zemeckis did, but I didn't. You know,
they were
I just
hoping for it anyway.
Hoping we'd have a good run, and didn't anticipate it was going to thrive the way it did.
Eric Stoltz played the original Marty.
That's right.
And they released all that footage, I guess, in a Blu-ray and everything. Did you know that was going to have to change?
I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. I think most people didn't. You know, I mean, it was 6 weeks into shooting.
Right.
6 weeks shooting.
Strange thing to do.
Yeah, and we were out in that industrial, the city of industry, a huge mall, night after night for about 3 weeks, and shooting, and everything seemed cool. He was very good. It's just that they needed to have somebody with a more comic flair, you know, like Michael.
Yeah.
And so they made the switch, but he wasn't like giving a lousy performance. You know,
there was just whatever that wasn't clicking with the character.
Yeah, and he's a very good actor, a really good actor. And then one night when we broke for lunch, so to speak, at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, we all had lunch, and then they said, everybody, please come over to this area over here. We have an announcement to make, and still no sign. And then Spielberg was there, and other suits from Universal, etc. And they got up and just made the announcement they're going to make the change, and it was kind of like a wake. It wasn't anything to be cheery about.
Because you've all spent this time getting to know this kid.
Yeah, and it was sad, you know, and I was kind of like terrified because I thought I was still getting into the character. It was the first film of the trilogy, and I was hoping I was hitting my marks, you know, so I thought, my God, I'm going to do this all over again. Sure. I don't know if I can do this again, you know, but it worked out.
Work out, indeed it did, and the doc was completely right. I you know, the Eric Stoltz stuff is interesting. You know, I've never heard him ever talk really about it. Has anyone ever heard from Eric Stoltz about his experience on Back to the Future? I mean, if they have, please tweet me a link or email me one, because I would love to talk to that guy about, I mean, just in general about acting, because I think he's a phenomenal actor. If you've seen him in Mask, or you've seen him in, obviously, you know, Pulp Fiction, and so many great films that he's done, I would love to be able to sit down and talk to him about Back to the Future, because I don't think that there's ever been a full interview with him discussing his feelings and thoughts about it. I'm sure it's a sore subject for him, and he's kind of been ridiculed in some way by people involved, just saying that he wasn't good for the part, and it's not so much his fault. I mean, I think he was doing the best with the material and his sensibilities, but I'd love to hear from him. But, we know Michael J. Fox got the part, and before we move on to the question and answer portion of today's podcast, here is a vintage clip back in 1985, 37 years ago, with Michael J. Fox and Leah Thompson talking about their work in the film in which we all love and what Michael's initial reaction was to getting the role after Eric Stoltz was let go. Let's take a listen.
When they told you that you were going to do Back to the Future and that you were going to replace Eric, what did you feel? What happened?
Well, the first feeling that I had was get out of town, And then Gary Goldberg told me, actually, and he gave me the script. He said, go home and read it. And I went home and read it. I called Gary up at about 11:30. I think I woke his daughter up and had her wake him up and said, call Steven, don't let him change his mind. And then I talked to Bob Zemeckis and all these people, and they talked to me a little bit about, why that there were creative differences and whatnot, and their compassion and their feeling for what Eric was going to think and how Eric was going to feel impressed me. But there was so little time to really think a lot about, getting nervous about replacing another actor, maybe what he did and what I shouldn't do, and there was very little time to think about, oh no, it's a Steven Spielberg film and I'm either going to be a big star or I'm going to flop in his first, flop or whatever. There was no time for that. It was just like, I got to be there Tuesday, and boom, I was there and doing it, and then it was just staying awake. So everything happened so quick that there was really very little time to analyze anything or really get caught up in it. It was just, well, I said I was going to do it, I better do it.
Do you purposely find films that have all of these bizarre, unusual situations in it?
Well, I have been lucky. I have interesting stories, and I have tried to avoid, the prom and, will I lose my virginity this week? Those kind of storylines really kind of annoy me. So I've really tried hard to find different characters and interesting scripts.
In order to play the parts in something like Space Camp or Howard the Duck or even Back to the Future, it seems to me you have to have a terrific imagination to believe in these out-of-this-world situations. Do you?
I think I really do have a big imagination, ever since I was a little kid, And my mom used to make up stories every night for us. And she really filled our heads with a lot of interesting things, and I used to paint when I was real young. And also being a ballet dancer when I was younger was really great because you have to imagine everything when you're a ballet dancer. I mean, everything is in your head, It's acting without words and imagining everything in your own head.
Obviously, Back to the Future was such an enormous success that clearly the next movie that came out, people were going to compare. Now they're going to have two other roles at once to compare. Mm-hmm. So do the comparison for me between those three characters. The Back to the Future, Space Camp, and Howard the Duck, and what you did to yourself.
Well, it was really neat to play those three, very close together. I had hardly any time off between those three movies. And so, of course, there was a great challenge in Back to the Future because I was, the old lady, the really drunk and unhappy person that was the mother. And then I got to be the young, kind of ditzy, ebullient, kind of 50s girl, and that was a real nice challenge. But then I got really tired of going, So when I got Space Camp, it was great because I got to be very serious and centered and grounded and, no giggling, no cuteness, just straight. And after that, I was really sick of that. And in Howard, I'm a rock and roll singer, and I'm wild, all this hair and makeup and it's such a fantasy, and it's very physical. I use all my dancing. I'm always making big gestures and stuff, and it's high comedy, so kind of anything goes, which was really fun to do.
What most of the Amblin movies, and also it's a great pairing because Bob Zemeckis did the same way. They like to make entertainment movies, and people right now have I mean, this whole cinema verite thing, I think, is kind of worn on them. If you want real life, you can walk out on the street and get hit by a car, and that's real. Or you could, you know, drive to East LA, and unfortunately, that's real, and all those kind of things. So what they want to make movies about magical things. So you feel it when you're working, yeah. It's a little part of you, when we're doing some scenes, that I go, I wish I could do this, you know? I wish I could, like, you know, these things that happen to me, and in a way that they are, you know, because I'm doing the movie. So, yeah, that's the fun part about this movie. It's just, you really feel like there's something magical going on.
What about the future? What are you looking for in the near future? What are you looking to do?
A holiday would be nice, like a week or so. I could just sit on the beach. Well, I'm looking forward to Family Ties doing well, and I hope that if Back to the Future does real well, that that'll open up an opportunity for me to do another film on my next hiatus. But things are just so good that right now, and so much fun, that I don't want to waste any of this time worrying about tomorrow, worrying about specific things in tomorrow, like, you know, what am I going to do, you know, da-da-da. I just want to kind of enjoy this now, and as long as it goes on, I'll keep enjoying it. But I don't want to look back on it 10 years from now and say, I could have really had a good time during those days if I wasn't so busy worrying about what was going to happen next, you know? So I'm just having a good time and working real hard, hopefully.
There's also a few questions that we have to get through, and these were sent in by our good friend over at Collect BTTF, Eric Tate. And I just want to go through and read them, and we can discuss each of these as they go. The first question is this. Do you think Back to the Future would still made a cultural impact if parts 2 and 3 had not been made? Absolutely. Absolutely, because part 1 was the highest grossing film in 1985, one of the most popular movies in the entire decade of the 80s. And the DeLorean and so much of that film has this classic iconography, and the performances are just so off the charts that, yeah, I do think it would have still made a cultural impact. However, the impact that it had on the culture was bolstered by the sequels, mainly part 2, because I've always talked about some of the iconography of the movie. And of course, there's the time machine. Of course, there's, you know, Save the Clock Tower and things. But think about the Nike Air Mags. Think about the Flying DeLorean, which I know was technically at the end of part 1. So yeah, maybe I'm wrong on that one. But think about the Gray Sports Almanac, the Pepsi Perfect, the hoverboard. These were the things that really got entered into the public conscious and the zeitgeist. I remember seeing CM Punk reference the Gray Sports Almanac on an episode of Monday Night Raw. I mean, it's so embedded in the culture that I think that the original movie, sure, would have been a massive success and had a cultural impact, but parts 2 and 3, mainly part 2, I think is the main cause of why it's had staying power, because we got to see the future. And I think that the flying cars and the just everything, interacting with yourself in the movies, we've seen kind of that played out even in the Avengers film, right? They talk about interacting with your other selves. And I think that, without the second movie in particular, it wouldn't have had as big of a resonance, but it's still such a classic that we would be talking about Back to the Future. But I do think it may have been along the similar lines of the Goonies, a little bit more than that, but along the similar lines of Goonies or Ghostbusters, right? I really think the sequels did a lot for the movie and keeping it in the public's consciousness. The second question here is, what is a piece of merch that you'd personally like to see that has been overlooked thus far? Oh, man. A piece of merch from the movies that's been overlooked thus far? Well, I'll tell you what. I already have it. I would love a tabletop version of the Doc Brown refrigerator from 1885. Like having that mechanism to dispense ice or maybe to make a slushie. Because, we're here in Texas, all right? It's hot. If I had like a little tabletop replica of the Doc Brown refrigerator, but it makes slushies. I might sound like a 12-year-old right now, but that would be the thing that I want the most. Aside from that, I know there's been like reproductions of the clock and the clock tower, but maybe something officially licensed that could be a really awesome, grandfather clock that kind of looks like the Hill Valley Courthouse and clock tower, to have the cats on the side of it, and maybe even Doc Brown hanging off of one of the hands of the clock like Harold Lloyd and like he does in the movie. I think that would be cool. But the refrigerator, I'm going to stick by. I really like that one. Speaking of part 3, the third question is, originally in part 3, Marshall Strickland is murdered point blank by Buford, which would have had significant impact on the image that Buford portrayed. And unlike the point blank murdering of Doc in part 1, Strickland's would not get redemption by being reversed. Had this been left in the final film, do you think it would have been fitting for Buford's character or take his villainous arc too far? I like that they cut it. That was a great cut. It was a great cut, and my mind may have changed on this over the years. I can't remember what I originally said earlier in this podcast run, because we did talk about this. But I think cutting it was right, because if you had already seen him murder somebody, like we heard that he killed a bunch of people, right? I think seeing him kill Strickland, I think it would have taken his villainous arc too far. I like that he was a little bit bumbling, like Griff was and like Biff was. Biff and Griff and Buford, and this is a credit to Tom Wilson, did such a good job of striking fear in the heart and being an intimidating force, right, for Marty in the movies. But he also was able... But he was also able to find a way to be able to be silly and goofy enough that you could believe that he would be beaten. Like you thought Marty could outsmart him. And so you were fearful of Marty, but more so the suspense of the films was not the villainous Biff. It was the race against time that Marty always had, right? Like that's where you felt the most suspense and the most, oh my God, is he going to make it? Oh, he did it, right? But you knew that Biff and Griff and Buford were obstacles in that. I feel like if he murdered Strickland, which he did, but it was cut out of the film. But if we saw that in the final version of the movie, I think that the silliness of that Griff character would have gone away, and it kind of would have made it a little bit of a drag, right? Because we don't see anyone get murdered in Back to the Future, right? You see Doc gets shot as it was referenced, but Doc comes back to life. We know that Old Man Biff disappears in part 2, but that was even taken out. Right, and he disappears because Lorraine shot him in the 90s, right? According to the Back to the Future website. So I think that having that in there would have had an impact on the film, and it would have made it a little bit darker. One of the reasons I also love part 3, and sometimes it's my favorite of the Back to the Future trilogy, is because of how fun it is. And it's got this great Western vibe to it, but it's so much fun, and it's light. It's light. And I think that would have made it a little too dark. And again, they're coming off the second movie that was criticized for being a little too dark, right, by some people. So I think that would have been a step in the wrong direction. It was a good cut. Okay, question 4. Back to the Future continues to get referenced throughout pop culture entertainment, including at the most unexpected times, such as in the recent series finale of the show This Is Us. I didn't know that. What is the most unexpected Back to the Future reference you've seen or heard in recent years? Wow, I did just reference CM Punk, but I will tell you, I do know what it is. It is wrestling related. There's a show on Netflix called Glow, and it stands for the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and it's a scripted dramedy based on an actual show from the 80s called The Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, where these women were trained to be wrestlers, and they inhabited different characters, like very character-oriented, like over-the-top characters, right? And in this one, in this version, this fictionalized version of how this glow came to be, Mark Maron kind of plays the director and writer of the Glow TV show within this series, because the series is about a television show being produced, like Glow being produced. It's a little meta. I hope I'm making sense. But the whole season of that first season, he talks about this idea that he has of a film, and he's writing it, and he's working on it. And it's kind of an arc that pays off toward the end of the series. I don't know if it's in the finale, but it's in the last couple episodes, right? And the joke is he has this idea of this kid goes back in time and falls in love with his mother, right? And he's laying this idea out to, I believe it was like a band or something, that they were like hanging out backstage, and he's laying this idea out to them. And the guy goes, "Hey man, I just saw that movie." He's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I just saw that movie. It's called Back to the Future." And he goes to the movie theater and sees Back to the Future and goes and sees it and realizes this great idea that he had has already been produced. And I thought it was fun that it was a long-term joke that paid off. And I didn't see it coming, and it married, again, my love of wrestling and Back to the Future together. So I guess that would be the most unexpected one, because I didn't see the joke coming. I didn't see it coming. And so it was fun. Question number 5. Some of the best content we've seen recently to extend a franchise's story has been through episodic shows, such as Disney's various Star Wars shows or Cobra Kai. If you could design the overall plot of a show to carry on the story of Back to the Future, where would you take the adventure? It'd have to be like, this is what I think. It's got to be centered around the kids, like they did in the Ghostbusters Afterlife movie. You got to have the new characters with the legacy characters. I see it being, Hill Valley High School. Marty has, taken over the role as the vice principal of the school or something. He's almost the Strickland-esque, right, guy that we know. And during the tension that he's overseeing, very Breakfast Club-esque, there's a group of kids there that we get to know, and they somehow, like, discover Marty's or Mr. Vice Principal McFly's, background. And through the episode of through the series of the show, Marty kind of opens up and kind of becomes the Marty that we used to know of old, and turns from the villain to the hero again. I think that would kind of be the arc, almost like the Vader in a way, right? This is really coming off the top of my head. I haven't thought of any of this till just this very second at 6:20 p.m. here in Houston. So maybe he could be like almost the antagonist of the story at first, and you're rooting for him the whole time to get back into form, rediscover his love, and he rediscovers his love of music and time travel through these kids, and somehow the kids get the time machine, and what if the kids get the time machine and they go back in? There we go. Marty McFly is now Vice Principal McFly. These kids, whatever, they're in detention. He calls them all slackers. They're real jerks, right? Whoa, sorry. They're real jerks. And, or he's a real jerk to them. And they somehow, maybe like, he sentences them to do work at his house, I don't know, on the weekends for community service. Somehow we get there, right? They discover the time machine. Marty still has it. They go back into the 80s, and they go to school with Marty McFly. And we actually get to see Marty in high school this time and see what he's like in the school. And they befriend him. They got to figure out how to get back. And we see a young version of Marty in the 80s, played perhaps by a different actor, I'm assuming. That'd probably be a big, Tom Holland, right? And we see them kind of help change the future for Marty, so that when they go back in time, he's like the Marty that we love. And he's still the vice principal, but he's like a cool, badass vice principal. I don't know. That's just what I came up with. Y'all tweet me your ideas. I'd love to hear. If we had a Netflix show, Back to the Future, what would be the plot? That was off the top of the dome. Number 6 is Brad Gilmore can't fight the itch any longer and steps into the squared circle as a full-time pro wrestler. You want to use Back to the Future as an inspiration for your gimmick, aside from Marty, which has been done already in recent years. That's by professional wrestler Kushida. Did a Marty McFly gimmick in WWE. Which character do you use as the core of your persona? I mean, Doc's the obvious one, right? But I think it would be George. And I'd have my valet be like Lorraine. And I'd kind of be like this weakling a little bit until you did something to tick off. Like if you try to mess with Lorraine, like Biff does in the 50s, it gets me angry. And I put a can of whoop ass all over you. That's what I see. But Doc would be fun too. But I like the George McFly angle because you're like you're the baby face and you got. I don't want to reveal too much secrets of the business, but that would be good. That would be good. All right, finally, Universal Studios Florida is opening a Back to the Future escape room. Design some Easter eggs you're hoping to see throughout the experience. Oh man, I want to see Easter eggs. You know, I've never done an escape room, so I don't really know too much of like what's in there. But if I just want things, I want headlines from the 2015 USA Today. If you ever read that copy that they put out back in 2015, there's like a lot of fun stories, like Nixon wins 4th term or something like that. I'd like to see like those papers around. Perhaps like a Time magazine or Doc Brown's Man of the Year or something like that. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But Easter eggs, you want to see almost like they did with the ride, where Doc is there for some of the big moments in time. Like I'd like to see like pictures like that. I think what would be fun is if the person guiding you through or the people guiding you through are all like the television waiters from the Cafe 80s, right? Like Michael Jackson and Ronald Reagan and the like. They're the ones trying to give you clues and help guide you through, and then like glitch out when they're about to tell you exactly what to do. That would be fun. I don't know. I've never done an escape room, so maybe this isn't the best question for me. But those are just what come to my mind. I don't know, guys. That's what I have. That's what I have, and I had fun questioning the future with you all today and reading about the $75,000 copy of Back to the Future. But nevertheless, guys, we have come to an end today. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Back to the Future, the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the show. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. Check out the book. Check out past episodes of the show. Tell me what topics you want to cover. Where do we dive into next? Until next time, I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore. This is Back to the Future, the podcast, the only podcast looking back in time at the greatest film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future. And we will see you in the future.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now?